Welcome to FM Radio, your go-to podcast for everything in the world of funds management. Whether you're an experienced advisor, a seasoned investor, or just starting your journey, we're here to break down the complex world of funds management, all in a way that makes sense. Each episode, we'll talk to the experts to get their insights on everything from asset allocation to risk management and give you the inside track on how decisions are made. So tune in and let's turn up the volume on the topics that affect you and your clients. In this episode of FM Radio, we're going to be talking about philanthropy. What is it? How can it help clients? And for advisors, why is it the hardest word to say? To help us unwrap all these mysteries of philanthropy, I'm joined today by Susan Chenoweth. Susan is someone who's been leading the charge for good causes and positive change in society since way back when she was a placard-waving misfit at uni. Today, as the head of Philanthropic Services at Elston, Susan helps advisors to understand the different kinds of structured giving and to see how and when philanthropy might become part of the conversation. Hello, Susan. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So, Susan, it's interesting when we talk about philanthropy and the fact that you're so involved in it. You know, when did you first become passionate about giving? There must have been something in you growing up or in your uni days.
Oh, gosh. I think giving back is what life is all about, really. I think giving back was something that was instilled in me from a very young age. My family is Catholic and my mum always did a lot to give back in the community from when I was really little. I remember that had a big influence on me growing up. I remember having a young girl in my class in primary school. I think my mum packed a second lunch for her for the better part of a year and really encouraged me to look out for and help out people who are less fortunate. So, yeah, from way back when.
Obviously, you end up going down a different career path, and it's not an obvious path to find yourself in, I guess, in philanthropic services, a very specialised field. But initially, you ended up in financial planning. Would that be right?
Yeah, straight out of uni. So I did economics at university and found myself in money market, actually, in a dealing room environment, which was not for the faint of heart when in the early 90s as a young woman, and pretty quickly realised that was not the place for me. So I actually went back to uni part-time and I was studying psychology, and ultimately I did move into investment management and enjoyed that a lot more. But there was a point in time there that I was really considering a career in psychology.
That's amazing. Psychology is such an interesting area. I think of like Freud and psychoanalysis and all sorts of strange things, but it actually flows through a few different careers, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It's pretty broad. And I think, relationships, purpose, meaning, parenting, it's come in pretty handy for me over the years.
So you've gone through almost becoming the new Carl Jung. You've ended up becoming a financial planner, and then you've joined all the dots, connected all the dots and become somehow involved in philanthropy. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, look, I think, we talked earlier about origins of wanting to give back and realising how important that was when I was younger. And actually, when I was studying psychology, I did a lot of volunteering. I was a volunteer counsellor at Lifeline and helped an organisation who helped refugees settle into Australia when they came from all over the world. And I think for me, that desire to give back and do something for others in the community has been there for a long time for me. And I think that volunteering, it was enormously beneficial for me, incredibly rewarding, but it did help me to realise just how important having access to those services for people who are vulnerable in our community, how important that is regardless of their financial means to access that. So I think it all started to change for me after I had children. I had my first child, Emily, and she was a baby and I was returning to work and I thought investment management's just not doing it for me. What else can give me some more purpose? So I moved into the not-for-profit sector, and then really now things have sort of come full circle, working in the philanthropic advisory space, and I've been in that space for about a decade now, having that knowledge of financial markets and financial planning and the not-for-profit sector helps me to really, I think, add a lot of value for clients who are really looking to merge the two and looking at how they can use their wealth to actually create a difference and create purpose in their life.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk to, a few advisors and what gives them satisfaction, what do they enjoy about their job, and that you're actually looking on the philanthropic side, which means you're seeing them achieve something not necessarily financial, but in a different sort of way. I mean, what is the real satisfaction? I mean, what does that feel like for you?
Oh, someone said to me the other day, gosh, you must love your job. And I do, because I think philanthropy is really important. For a start, those clients are doing something really important with their wealth and giving back and funding not-for-profits who often philanthropy is their only source of funding. So it's incredibly important for the community. But for those clients, I think it's not always straightforward to know, well, if they want to give back, how do they do so? How can they structure their giving, or how do they actually use their wealth to give back to the community? And being able to guide them through that process, yeah, it's really rewarding. But it's really interesting how different that can look for different people. And for some people, the meaning and the satisfaction comes from involving their family or involving their grandchildren. And for others, it's being able to contribute to a cause that they really care about.
Yeah, it's true. And but one of the things that I think surprised me, because since I've known you and I've gotten to know what you do, is also that it's a surprising satisfaction of seeing people connect to a community.
I think it really helps to be part of a philanthropic community. And I think when people start giving, they're not part of that community. So it's all quite new to them and they don't quite know where to start in terms of who can they ask, who's done this before, who knows and can give them some sort of guidance around how to direct their giving. So being part of a community is really very valuable. And we try to create that community with Elston through our Changemaker program of events, and it can be really useful for people to feel like they're part of a community of givers and of not-for-profit organisations so that they can learn more about philanthropy and how to do it well.
So what happens, what's the format of those sort of events?
Yeah, our Changemaker events are all about bringing together like-minded people, whether they're philanthropists who've been giving for years and years or someone who's thinking about giving or brand new to giving, bringing those people together with a range of different not-for-profits and helping them to understand a particular cause area a lot better. And I often say, if there are three things that I'd like people to sort of come away from those events with, it's expanding their network, helping them to understand a little bit more about a cause that they're interested in, but thirdly, just being really inspired about what could be possible and what role they could play in giving to that area that they care about.
And I guess when you talk about making them more aware of a particular, a cause, or do you find that you are shining a light on things that are not necessarily known?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in a number of different ways. So sometimes that will be actually helping people to understand a cause area more deeply. And for example, we ran our event on the arts and how can philanthropy create an impact on the arts just a few months ago. And of course, some people would think, well, the arts is about funding beautiful artworks in a gallery. And yes, it certainly is that partly, but it's so much more than that. Even in our Queensland Gallery of Modern Art, we have the most innovative programs that are helping dementia patients and really vulnerable groups in our community, people with low vision, to experience life in such a different way and enhance their quality of life so significantly. But these events really sort of bring those causes to life and help people to understand so much more about what can be done and their role that they can play. And of course, learn about charities that they may never have heard about before.
Yeah, and the other thing I think about, and you can correct me on this as well, because I could have the wrong idea on this, but I often think about the the transition to retirement or the transition from running a family business, and what happens after that, and how for some people that's quite a difficult thing. Your purpose is your career or your business. And imagine that it doesn't actually sort of fill the hole, but it maybe provides them with a new purpose or a way to maintain a connection with community. Do you find that people in that transition?
Most definitely. And you're right. Everyone needs purpose in their life. And I think as we move through different chapters in our life, particularly I think when people do retire, and that can be a trigger event. It can be a time where assets are sold, businesses are sold, or properties are sold, and then that family that might have always been quite asset rich and cash poor suddenly has an opportunity to think about, well, what do we want to do with our wealth?
It's interesting because I guess the goal for a lot of advisors, if I think back maybe decades ago, was probably quite simple. It was all about planning and preparing to be financially secure and comfortable and have the freedom to do what I want. But then you now start to realise that part of that thinking is not just a financial goal, but also then a sense of well-being and happiness and fulfilment and all those different things that are open to you. So I can see how philanthropy could become part of that, because it's not just about going on the world trip. It's also, well, what am I doing with my life? Or, what sort of legacy am I leaving behind? Or, what's my relationship with my family and my community from here on in?
Yeah, and you touched on legacy there. I think legacy is a huge motivator for philanthropy, big or small. And it's not always about the amount of money. It's about the values and the purpose behind that giving. And philanthropy can be a great way of grandparents and parents drawing in their children. I met with a family just yesterday who that's their primary goal for their giving. The grandparents, the patriarch and matriarch in that family, want to bring their whole family together to give together. And it's really for that family about handing down values and helping their grandchildren.
So when you look at it, it sounds like you've done a really good job of explaining why philanthropy is so good, so beneficial. It sounds so positive, and yet the title of this episode is Why is Philanthropy the Hardest Word? It's a terrible steal from Elton John in Why is Sorry the Hardest Word? Why do you think it is? Why is philanthropy so challenging for some advisors to bring that topic into a conversation?
Well, we know, Pete, from our philanthropic research that we have done recently at Elston, that there are a number of reasons why advisors really struggle to bring this topic up with their clients. And I think it boils down to, firstly, they're not confident. They don't have the knowledge and the skills to actually have those conversations with their clients. And secondly, they're not sure who to refer their clients to. They might know plenty of estate planning lawyers if they want to refer their client to do their wills, but who do they refer them to if they need philanthropic advice? And, I also think they're just not used to having these kind of values-led, touchy-feely kind of conversations with their clients. It's very much financial, numerical, tax-driven conversations. And philanthropy is a whole different kettle of fish with purpose and values, and that doesn't always come easy for some advisors.
Were the results from that research surprising to you, or did you have a bit of a hunch that perhaps that's how advisors were feeling that there was a barrier?
Well, we know there has been research done right across the world for a number of years now that really tells us that advisors are not having those conversations with their clients. And so we wanted to delve a little bit deeper and unpick why. We know the conversations aren't being had, but the research did give us a lot of insight into why, and also into what kind of tools and support that advisors are looking for to be able to start changing that situation.
Because you were saying it's a whole new set of skills. I guess it's not completely alien to what they know and feel comfortable with now, but it is a slightly different toolkit. Do you think that's something that can be easily taught, or you can actually skill them up to a point where they feel quite comfortable to talk about things that they have their own set of, technicalities?
Yes, I do. And we've certainly done that quite a lot through our philanthropic masterclasses that we run for advisors, and we've been doing that for about 12 months now. And it's really interesting to see advisors come along to those to learn. They don't need to know everything about philanthropy, but they need to know how to have the conversation, what to ask, what to look for in their clients that might indicate that a client is motivated to give, and that there might be an event in their life which is a trigger point for them giving.
I'd imagine that one of the biggest things would be, I guess when I think about philanthropy, it sounds like an old world term. It's not for everybody. Maybe some advisors think, therefore, it is just for the uber wealthy. It is for the Bill Gates of this world. Is that a perception that you found coming through the research as well?
Yeah, we do know that that's the case. And you're right, philanthropy, gosh, I think a lot of people struggle to actually pronounce the word, let alone feel any sort of alignment to it. So there are, a lot of the time we do try to just refer to it as giving, because essentially that's what it is. When people look to give back, yes, we know that not many advisors are having that conversation, and because I think that they think it's the domain of the very rich. And in fact, the research revealed some of this to us. Most advisors think that there's no point in setting up a structure or giving in that way unless you've got $5 million in assets. And then actually when we talk to high net worth families and philanthropic clients, they feel quite differently. They consider that if you have $1 million in assets, that they would have capacity to give back in some way. And of course, there are structures that are available for people to give with as little as $25,000 to be able to set up a charitable sub-fund in a public ancillary fund. So really there's lots of ways that people can give with far less money than that. So
just walk me through that again. So that you're saying that the advisors are waiting for the client with millions of dollars in, I guess, surplus wealth almost. And that's perhaps why the conversation never gets brought up. But in fact, there are options where you can do it with much, much less. So they're really missing an opportunity to have that discussion. But just tell me, how is it possible that there are two different levels of the different structures that allow that to happen?
Yes, so there's two different types. Well, there are a number of different charitable trust structures available in Australia, but ancillary funds are very popular because the donations into ancillary funds are completely tax deductible, and that is uncapped. Whether you're giving 100,000 or 100 million, it's all tax deductible. So they're very attractive. So there are two types, private and public. And private ancillary funds probably don't make a lot of sense to set up unless you have around $1 million in assets, because there are costs associated with those. But public ancillary funds, which a lot of people don't know about, you can set up a sub-fund in a public ancillary fund with as little as $25,000, which makes it very accessible to far more people than I think advisors realise.
That's quite a difference. And I guess the private, there's a lot more responsibility, and I guess there are some costs involved in that, but it's quite a big responsibility. Is that the sort of thing that I guess if a family, for example, decided to do that, it's because they probably have a particular cause in mind? That
can be a motivation, but there are a number of reasons why someone might choose to set up their own private ancillary fund. There is responsibility, but with that responsibility also comes control. So typically that family would be directors of the trustee of that ancillary fund, and that opens up all sorts of possibilities in terms of involving children, involving grandchildren. It also can be a bit of a sandpit environment for taking on governance responsibilities for those younger family members. And of course, control of assets and decision making around how a private ancillary fund might invest their assets.
Yeah, because it just sounds like you can be a lot more, I guess, creative with that. When you're talking about we may actually have property within the portfolio where we actually want to give them use of that and provide direct benefit, there's a little bit more control. But the thing that I found interesting there when you're talking about the connection between family, bringing in the younger generations, getting them involved in some of that decision-making, they're becoming part of the family business in a different way, there must be enormous benefit.
Huge benefit, and That's right. And that's a really big motivator for some families. I mean, those younger generations will have experience sitting on a board, but also developing the skills to work with other family members and actually make decisions about some really important things for the family, legacy, how they can give back, how they can use their wealth to fulfill their purpose. And yes, it can prepare them really well for roles that they may take on within the broader family business or wealth management down the track.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about generational wealth transfer. We're talking about trillions of dollars moving from one generation to the next. And it's just fascinating to think about what that means and how that happens, whether it happens through an inheritance or whether it happens through gifting to younger family members or through philanthropy, where you give them the chance to get involved with that. And then all generations, I guess, are then enjoying giving while living. So it does sort of fit into the dynamic. People are living longer. Therefore, you've got extended families. You've got more people involved. So it seems to me to play into, where the world is at the moment.
Most definitely. And I think there are a few other trends going on in our community. We know that those younger generations are more values-led and that they give more. They're more interested in philanthropy than potentially those baby boomers who worked very hard to accumulate that wealth and didn't necessarily want to give it away as quickly. And we also know that Australia's affluent demographic is the most rapidly growing in the world alongside Singapore. So all of a sudden in Australia, we have a really rapidly growing group who can afford to give. And when they're thinking about use of their wealth and legacy planning, they know that they can afford to look beyond their own needs in retirement, the needs of their family. And so, of course, they're starting to think about philanthropy and what else they can do.
So I want to turn back to what we said before. We're talking about now the millions of dollars that might be available and multi-generational families, and there's an incredible purpose. But at the other end, there's you said from as little as $25,000, I think. $25,000, that sounds like a really good win on a game show. It's not a huge amount of money. How does that work? Can you tell me a little bit about the sorts of people who've been attracted to that?
Yes, and it is so interesting. We work with such a diverse group. For example, I have one client, lovely lady, who's a retired midwife and nurse, and she has no children, no dependents. And so whilst she is by no means a wealthy woman, she's financially comfortable, and she's thinking about, well, who do I leave my modest amount of wealth to when I pass away? And she's actually gotten started with that in her lifetime, which has given her incredible satisfaction and reward. And she's just given a small amount in her lifetime, $25,000. She's setting up scholarships for young women to do postgraduate study in midwifery studies. What a great thing that's so aligned to her own interests, and she gets to enjoy that in her lifetime. I think she's a great example of a really very everyday person who has a small amount of money to give and can do great things with it.
Where do you think she started then? Because you were saying before that an advisor wouldn't necessarily open that conversation or bring that topic into the conversation with someone like her. Do you think it was likely that she raised the topic, or do you think she's had an advisor who has tuned in?
In her case, she did have an advisor who was tuned in, and that advisor referred her to me, and we were able to help her and inform her around what her options might be.
Because it's a simple formula, isn't it? It's, as you said, you don't have to be, I guess, in whatever definition, wealthy. You have to have enough. You have to go, I've looked after myself and my family, and I can see that there's perhaps a small surplus, and that's where I want to, apply that to do the most good that I can.
Yes, and I think we also work with a lot of clients who might be having a conversation about estate planning, whether it be with their estate planning lawyer or with their financial advisor. And they're thinking about how do we want to leave our wealth, particularly if they don't have children, and they're thinking about charities. It's so great when that trusted advisor can explain to them, well, actually, you can do this, you can do some of this in your lifetime. And that's when often we'll start working with those clients and help them to set something up in their lifetime that can then be continued on after they've gone, but they do get the enjoyment while they're living.
I think that's huge. I love the whole idea. I love the rhyme. I love living while giving. I just think it just sounds like that was so much more satisfying, so much more in terms of what you want to achieve. Why would you wait? Life expectancy in Australia is probably an average of, mid-80s. Why would I wait until I've passed and then something is in my will? You can do that. That's fantastic. But it would be so good to enjoy that and to enjoy that with your connection of friends or family and actually see the impact, while you're around. That has to be good.
Absolutely. And, we talked about it before. It can create so much joy, purpose, and something that people can get passionate about while they're giving. And gosh, I have so many clients who are actually surprised themselves about how engaged and how passionate they've become once they've gotten started and that they've enjoyed it so much. It's become a really, really big thing in their life.
So what else, if I go back to the research, what else was there? You talked about a bit of a disconnect because you did talk to advisors and you did talk to clients. What were some of the disconnections you found?
I think one of the really big disconnects was around tax and why people give. And a lot of advisors, understandably, because they're pretty financially driven professionals, really felt that the big driver for their clients around giving must be tax. It's about reducing their tax bill. If they've got a big tax bill, they can make tax-deductible donations, and that's why they would give. But of course, there's so much more to it than that. And when we surveyed high net worth individuals, and of course I see this anecdotally every day of the week, people don't give for the tax benefit. Of course, it's a wonderful bonus. Everyone loves to reduce their tax, but they give because they want to give back to causes that they care about. They want to create legacy.
I'll throw a tricky one in for you, and this is something that you talked, I think, right at the start. I don't know if you used the words. You might have said touchy-feely. I might be putting words in your mouth, but it felt like it was something that was probably would come quite naturally to maybe a female advisor, and maybe it's something that even a female client would feel more comfortable having those discussions. Do you think there's an element of truth in that? And if that is true, could any advisor learn those skills, those soft skills?
I think we do see a lot of female advisors who do have that philanthropic conversation. Yes, certainly not only women, but I think there are more women who are having those conversations with their clients. Maybe it comes more easily to them, I'm not sure. But we have lots of male advisors who do have those conversations. Regardless, I think it comes down to, I think, the type of relationship that an advisor has with their client. And I think that if they're not having that values-led conversation and asking their clients those questions, they're missing a really valuable opportunity for themselves to get to know their clients better. I mean, in our survey, we found that 1 in 5 advisors don't even know if their clients give to charity or not, and 1 in 3 didn't know if their clients were intending to make a bequest of a gift through their will. So just having these conversations and knowing your client better, of course, it's going to be great for advisors, help them to deepen their relationship and help them to potentially get to know those future benefactors or successors, the kids, the other family members that they may not have relationships with now, but who will ultimately be the inheritors of this wealth. So it's a good thing for advisors to understand.
It's a massive opportunity. It feels like it's the natural thing that you would want to strengthen the relationship with clients. And as you said, it's just a continuation of, I guess, listening and getting to know your client as people. You've already been talking to them about their dreams and their plans and what's important to them. You know their kids' names, you know their dog's name. You know so much about them that it would just seem to be natural that as they move, I guess, into that pre-retirement phase, that the conversations do become, not deeper necessarily, but they do move into that area where, what's the connection? What's life going to look like in the next 10, 20 years? What will you be doing and what will you enjoy? What's the purpose? So it just feels like it's a natural progression. So it can be taught.
Definitely can be taught.
Well, that's fantastic, Susan. We could talk about philanthropy all day, but I think you've given us some really wonderful insights. I guess it sort of demystified a few things for people as well, which is terrific. So, thank you for coming in. And I think what you've been able to do today is really break things down for us, show us how important philanthropy can be in building client relationships, especially as wealth is moving from one generation to the next, and really prove that philanthropy doesn't have to be the hardest word. That's all for this episode of FM Radio. We hope you can join us again soon as we tune into another aspect of funds management that affects you and your clients. In closing, I'd just like to say that Elston acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and acknowledges their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to the people, the cultures and the elders, past, present and emerging. FM Radio was recorded at The Pod at Cutting Edge Studios, West End, Brisbane. It was hosted by Peter Goodall, and today's guest was Susan Chenoweth, Elston's Head of Philanthropic Services. For more FM Radio episodes and full transcripts of the interviews, visit elston.com.au. And if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast series to make sure you don't miss a thing, you'll find FM Radio on your favourite platforms, including Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts. The information provided in this podcast is general in nature. You must consider your own circumstances prior to making any investment. For more information, go to elston.com.au or speak to your financial advisor. Elston Asset Management is authorised by EP Financial Services, AFSL number 325252.